Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. Round yon virgin mother and child, holy infant so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace. You know, when you get outside of the city, you get away from lights and so forth out into the fields, and it can really get dark. And I can imagine it was very, very dark that night when the shepherds were there keeping watch. They had probably a small fire to warm themselves by. But otherwise, it was totally dark. There were no street lamps, no fluorescent lights or anything like that around. So imagine what it would be like to be in the dark like that, and all of a sudden the light just comes on, like, there it is, You can almost see them there, here you are 1 minute, maybe they're sitting around talking by the fire and keeping an eye out in case something goes after their sheep, and the next minute they're going, ah! And that's probably why the angel starts off by saying, do not be afraid. Because he's probably stopped all their hearts and he wants to get them going again. But then, he also says something to us. Because he not only says, do not be afraid to them, but he says, do not be afraid right down through the centuries. Why not be afraid? And he goes on to say, because I bring you tidings of great joy. For unto you this night in David's city is born a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. So fear not. Don't be afraid. The Savior has been born. This past year and a half, we've been through rough times, haven't we? And we need to hear this message again. We need to listen again as the angel says to us, fear not. You see it in so many people. You see it in their eyes. That fear that ties you in knots. Fear that takes away paralyzes our thinking. Fear that leads to questions like, am I going to lose my home? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? Am I going to be able to put food on the table? Over this past year, we've seen so many people who've lost their homes, lost their jobs, lost their dreams. We all need to hear this message again tonight. Fear not. Do not be afraid, because the Savior has been born. Fear is a strange thing. It's like a vortex, a whirlpool sucking you down. Fear starts, and companies start laying people off because they're afraid. Banks stop lending money because they're afraid. People stop buying because they're afraid. And what started off bad gets worse and worse and worse. The best description of the fear we're facing, I think, comes from another time when this country was going through hard economic times. And Franklin Roosevelt, in his first inaugural address, said this, "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing that we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance." We should not be afraid. We should not let ourselves be bound up, knotted up inside with fear or dread, because we belong to Christ. Our Savior was born. He did not come to this earth to leave us behind or abandon us. And yet so many of us act as though it never. To turn to Christ is to recognize that in Him we have salvation. In Him, no matter what happens. We have a lady in this parish who this past year had to go through a really rough time. She developed a medical problem, and because she has had bad health for many years, she's one of those persons who has a pre-existing condition, so she can't get insurance. And she needed surgery that could save her life. But she also needed $60,000 to pay for it, and she didn't have it. And her sister asked me to go out to see her. So I went out to visit her, and she was in miserable shape. I stepped into the room, and there was this incredible stench because her foot was literally rotting off from the infection and the putrefaction that was coming into it. She had this tremendous fever. She was in and out of consciousness. She was having hallucinations and all these sort of things. And I anointed her and gave her communion. We prayed together for a while, and she was fairly cognizant for a little while. And then I went home, and I expected to hear a few days later that she had died. Instead, I got an email from her sister saying, "You won't believe it. The doctors can't explain it. They don't know what to do with her because she's supposed to be dead. They've thrown her off of hospice because hospice is for dying people, and she's not dying. She's come out of it. She's feeling great. No one can explain it." Fear not. The Savior is born. Sometimes maybe in the midst of our fears, in the midst of our troubles, we just need to remember to turn to him. To remember that he is with us. He's not up somewhere up there. He's right here. Maybe one way we can bring him into our lives is to remember what these trees we have here tonight are all about. You all know the story of the Christmas tree, don't you? You're going to know it in a minute. Okay.